Unmute the room.
Recording in progress.
Hello, Mike. I'm gonna promote you to panelist. Hey, Becky. Is this the meeting? Yeah, come on in. I just thought you might be interested.
Yeah.
I let Andrea know and she passed it on to Becky. It's a public meeting, but we are pretty informal.
Yeah.
And hello.
Hey there,
Okay,
can you guys hear me?
great. Hi, Mike.
Hello.
Great.
I just wanted to thank everybody. This is a public meeting, but we're pretty informal. So I want to call the meeting to order. It is 1:03 p.m. I'm Jessica Flintoff. I'm the township clerk. The other committee members, I'll do a roll call. Trustee Brandt.
Here.
Treasurer Yeaple.
Present.
All right, all three of us are present. And Becky, our associate assessor, is here too. So, and Mike, would you want to introduce yourself, please?
Sure, I'm Mike Muha. I'm the Deputy Executive Director with the Government Finance Officers Association.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. This is a working group of the Board of Trustees. We've met a couple of times because we're really trying to explore if and when we want to move to BS&A online from bsna.net. Before us, we have a proposed agenda of public comment, approval of the minutes, unfinished business, new business, and public comment. Is there a motion to adopt as presented?
I would make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
Support. Motion by Yeaple, support by Brandt. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Agenda adopted. Is there any public comment? I see nobody present and no one online. I see no public comment. Ryan, thanks for taking minutes last time.
Mhm.
I just forwarded them before this meeting. I don't know if you had a chance to take a look, Kathleen.
I am.
Is there a motion to adopt the minutes as presented?
I'd make a motion to adopt the minutes as presented.
Support?
Second.
Second by Brandt, motion by Yeaple. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are adopted as presented. Unfinished business, we each had a couple of assignments. And perhaps Ryan and Kathleen, do you want to give a brief kind of report back and update for Mike about kind of where we're at with our exploration of BS&A online? And then maybe we could turn it over to Mike for some questions that we have.
Sure. We met with the account manager plus their BS&A's head of the cloud implementation and another person in that area. They indicated, I went through my list of questions. So for example, we had a question on assessing and how many databases can be converted. And they said you can convert as many as you need. So it's not 2 years, it's as many as you would like.
Okay, I misunderstood that because I thought that they said only 2, so we can do as many as we want.
Right,
You mean going back,
Backwards, historical databases.
Yes.
which is very important to be able to do.
and I think that was the same for text. We asked a question about security, because you had brought that up, and they are indicated, which makes sense, indicating that their platform actually has more security than what we have on our own server. They use Microsoft Azure with the Duo 2-factor authentication. They back up at least once a day, I believe they said. So if there's any issues, they can restore. What else did I ask them? Asked about testing. If we wanted to use their acceptance testings, we can do that. Asked about training. They have quite a bit of training in their proposal, and that training is geared towards you pay for what you use. So there's a rate per day. So there's a fairly conservative schedule in there for testing and for training. If we don't need that service, then we will not be charged for it, which I think is pretty flexible and accommodating.
That's great.
In the cost, the cost for what we currently have, the functionality we currently have for BS&A, all modules, it's roughly $56,000 per year all in. That includes the cloud hosting. So that was less than I had originally thought it was.
That's much less, and I also thought the training was kind of a flat.
They quote a number of days, but we can either use those days or use less days.
Okay,
Or we could have more days if we required. And the driving of the schedule is really driven by their training staff to be able to do all the implementation. It seemed to me their bottleneck is training. So you would sign a contract and you might not be scheduled for the upgrade for like 10 months, and that's really driven by getting the firm schedule for their training group. And their technical group then accommodates the training schedule.
gotcha.
I thought that was reasonable.
Anything else, Ryan?
Yeah, I guess, we did get a full proposal, which, before when I had spoken, before this group was, is formed, I spoke with, our previous account manager, and he had just shared it with me in a Zoom call. We hadn't actually seen the full, agreement. They are projecting 42 total days of, training that's split up amongst the various modules. I think it was a very helpful meeting to learn a bunch about what they do have to offer. Yeah, that's it.
Cool. Well, I'd like to kind of shift a bit and turn it over to Mike. I want to first of all introduce Mike. He's the Deputy Executive Director of GFOA. Mike, I gotta say GFOA has been a great organization. We've done a lot of trainings, helped to train staff, us. So I think it's just a fantastic organization. I was really glad to see that you offer this ERP kind of consulting expertise. And here we are, as I'm sure a lot of jurisdictions are, in Michigan with this BS&A question. We've had BS&A.net, 12 modules since about 2008. And, they're pushing us to go online, and we're sort of taking a step back and saying, do we go ahead with them? Do we go ahead with them now? Do we look at other providers? So I'd like to kind of turn it over to you and ask for your guidance on how we should be approaching this question generally, and also about BS&A online specifically.
Sure. Yeah, so I guess nice to meet you guys. Happy to be here and help to the extent that I can. Just a little bit of background on us before we get started, and I think this will help. I maybe put my comments in context here, at least to give you some idea of kind of the position that I'm speaking from. So I've been at GFOA a little over 19 years. Most of that time focused on supporting our consulting group, or our research and consulting group, which the kind of principal activity of that group is to help organizations with ERP transformations. So work not only in Michigan, but across the United States, and not only with, smaller-ish sized local governments, but also very large local governments, counties, cities, school districts, townships, water utilities, things like that, to kind of help with these large and important projects that are ERP transformations. GFOA, as a membership organization, we're a 501c3 nonprofit with an educational mission to help promote local government best practices in financial management, as well as kind of the ancillary or related topics. As you guys all know, kind of your ERP system, or the suite of services that BS&A supports, is critical for a functioning local government. We had a client a couple of years ago say, as they were making the pitch to their elected officials and kind of justifying the project, like, every dollar that you bring in, every dollar that you spend goes through the system. It is stored by the system. It is tracked by the system. Every decision you make is backed up by information from this system. So I think it really is critical that organizations take an opportunity, once every 13 years, 14 years, 15 years to really assess their systems and make sure that it is still performing for them and they're able to get the information out of it and that it supports their business processes. I think you guys are in an interesting position or a good position now, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak here and I guess share some of our experiences in working with other organizations that have been in similar positions. First, I think organizations can approach these ERP projects with a bit of fear. They are big projects when you're converting from one system to another. Um, they can be difficult. They can be taxing on staff. But what I think our biggest lesson learned from kind of collectively across all of our projects is that while these projects can be difficult, they're by no means impossible. And you can really generate a significant return or a series of improvements with modern technology. And the best way to take advantage of that technology is to make sure that you're entering the project, and I'll use the term prepared. So we talk a lot about in our training the concept of ERP readiness, and that is to approach the project not as if it's a technology project alone, but as if it's a project that brings together your people, your policies, your processes, and then also your systems or your applications. And I think a huge component of ERP project readiness is having a vision for what you want to accomplish with your policies and your processes, and the way that your people are going to be interacting with these systems. I think that one mistake that a lot of organizations make when moving from your .NET type platform to a cloud platform is to assume that the policy process and people side of this will stay static and that you're going to derive your improvements solely from the upgrade in technology. So yes, the new system or the more modernized cloud version of the system most likely offers better reporting. It most likely offers a cleaner user interface that's friendlier for users. It most likely offers better security. It may also offer access for some customer-oriented features, online dashboards and things like that that you may not have access to now. But I think the biggest opportunity that organizations can take advantage of when going through the effort of deploying a new product is to also take time to think about what are those outcomes or what is the system then facilitating from a business process or a policy perspective. And to me, that's where you can really achieve the most and really take advantage of this opportunity that comes along, once every 10 years or once every 15 years, to really ensure that those four components are working together for the township.
Great. So what we've been with BS&A.net. We're looking at BS&A online and have done a lot of research. What are the other what's the information we should be asking BS&A online or other potential vendors?
Yeah, so I think the first thing comes down to scope first. I think not knowing exactly or not having done a review of your existing contract or utilization of your existing BS&A platform. My guess is that since you implemented in 2008, they've added features that you may or may not take advantage of.
Correct.
There may also be features that you never asked them to provide that may be common or useful for local governments of your size. So I think the one thing that we typically start projects with is if you think about kind of the modular areas or the functional areas that are included within your scope. So having not done again an in-depth analysis, my guess from the fact that most local governments kind of fit into the same bucket is that scope would include your general ledger, your project accounting or grant accounting functions, procurement functions, your ability of managing accounts payable, accounts receivable, capital assets. If you extend BS&A to HR, Then it, also tracks your position control, HR, benefits administration, leave administration, time entry, payroll. If you extend it to things like utility billing or capital asset management, then there are other functions that would be involved there. Is for each kind of major suite to put together a list of what you would consider to be goals for the project. And I think the goals for the project would encompass not only we want better reporting, and actually I think it's better if goals for the project don't speak specifically to software application features, but think to how we are going to use that application better. So, for example, if you're currently managing your projects with, Excel spreadsheets, or if you, have a procurement process that is paper-based and not utilizing, system-based workflows, that you could identify kind of what you would envision the project accomplishing when it comes out. I think another common way to prepare for the project is to think about those business processes or those transactions that the system is going to facilitate. And I'd be happy to share with you kind of our standard list of inventory of processes, is to think
That'd be
about
great.
like what would be different in a modern system if you had access to BS&A Online or some other modern piece of technology with those various business processes. So for example, in the procurement space, what would it look like when a vendor sends you an invoice? What would it look like when a vendor goes to register to do business with the township for the first time? How are you capturing information related to assets that you own? And I think, in some cases, getting to that point might involve some discussions with different people from around the organization. It is common for, not one person to set aside or to really identify the vision for the whole organization, that you would want to get together with, individuals from a variety of different departments to kind of brainstorm those opportunities, or at least make sure that you're aligned on that vision. If there are any specific components that you're worried about the system handling, or if there are any kind of specific features that you want to make sure that the new project contains, GFOA is also an advocate of developing what we call functional requirements. So the idea here is within each business process, you would effectively identify like user acceptance criteria that when the project is complete, these conditions would be met. So these conditions are the things that you're identifying with the functional requirements. And we like to think of them as basically test scenarios or test scripts that the system will complete when the project is over. And again, you can go into a high level of detail with these. You could go and take these at a fairly low level of detail. But having these statements, I think, helps set the scope of the project and help set the scope of the project around ways that relate back to your operational needs, your business process needs, and ultimately the business objectives that you're trying to meet. Having a clear vision for each of those functional areas, having a business process defined, and having what we call those functional requirements or acceptance criteria, then is a great way to not only communicate the scope to BS&A so that they're aligned on what you expect to achieve, but also communicate the scope to the rest of your staff and other officials there within the township, so that you can all make sure that you're moving the project forward and working towards crossing that same finish line together. Ideally, with a lot of our vendors that we have worked with in the past, we've also negotiated a statement of work or a contract document that includes those vision statements and functional requirements in the contract. And then what we're able to do is establish a kind of a milestone-based or fixed fee approach to contracting for the ERP that aligns you and the vendor and allows you to pay for implementation success as opposed to pay for level of effort that the vendor provides. Going through the effort of identifying those functional requirements is also a good way of bringing in that vendor. And I know if you already have a relationship with BS&A, it's a good opportunity for them to basically provide some initial input on those functional requirements as well. If you're getting product demos, or if you're going through kind of a sales process, they're able to basically show you or demo how the software is able to meet those requirements. You then again can get on the same page and then work towards using the project to deliver that functionality.
Thank you, Mike. I wanna, I know Becky has a comment or question. Becky?
Yeah, we have been discussing this with the other assessing units, because we have, Washtenaw Assessors Association. And they say it's a nightmare. It's been nothing but trouble. They told us to wait as long as we can and don't do it. I'm not kidding. And these are smart, very smart level
Yeah.
4 people. It is a mess. They have
Yeah.
had nothing but trouble to this day, and Pittsfield went on it over a year ago. And they are still having major difficulties. Major. I mean, it's really been a nightmare. So I'm just curious what you've heard or whatever, because we are like, a lot of us are stalling. We are not, there's only 3 of them out of the whole Washtenaw County that went on it, and it is, or assessing. Or assessing. I'm just saying, I have no idea how it's been, interpreted as far as, because I haven't talked to, anybody in, treasurers or clerks. But I do know that it's been a nightmare.
Yeah.
And
And I can understand that.
They cannot pull reports, they can't do the things that they needed to do, it's not doing them right, it's just, yeah.
Well, just to tag on, and for you and Ryan, can you share with Mike a little bit, who works nationally, about how the assessors in Washtenaw County and the treasurers in Washtenaw
Get together.
County
Mhm.
share data files?
Yes.
Can you talk about that flow?
Yes, well, in our situation, we go back and forth, we get our information from all the different townships and cities we'll go to when we're pulling cell studies and different things, especially for commercial, but we, as with Ryan, we have assessor slash treasurer meetings, so we all try to stay on the same page, we all try to do it the same way. And I don't know what you've heard from your treasurers about your side of it, but it's
Yeah.
not been good from our side of it.
I think kind of the question is, and I don't know from GFOA standpoint how much you guys know about this, because it has some to do with you, but it's not directly linked. You know, at least in Michigan, which is where BS&A was originally founded, the assessing database that they're working on now will get finalized next year and will be the premise of what my tax bills for July of 2026 are. So I end up basically creating a database out of the assessing records, all the assessed value of all the parcels we have. We have about 7,000 parcels, give or take. And then we then apply tax millage rates, for the county, for the school districts, what have you. I believe that inherently, more likely than not, BS&A can handle that. I would think you take a value, you multiply it, it shouldn't be hard. Keyword shouldn't be, but it is maybe more unique, and it may be something where we have to set it up as a criteria of understanding exactly how it works and see exactly how it works. I mean, one thing we asked, and they told us no, was having like a demo account set up,
A sandbox,
sandbox.
which is different than BS&A providing a demo,
Correct.
demonstration of functionality. Can
Yeah,
can I weigh
maybe
in?
just to comment real quick on those two points. I think real quick, for the latest one there, I would agree that most vendors are very hesitant to give you a demo environment, and or sandbox and let you play around in it. And I, having had that in the past, can also say that it provides very little value to you, because it's a system that's usually not configured. You don't know how to use it, and you just become frustrated clicking on things. And in the end, I'm not sure really what value that has. Now, I think the facilitated demo, I think, is a lot of value. And I think what you have to do when you do the facilitated demo is not necessarily pay attention to only what you see, but also kind of how that demo person is walking you through those screens. Because in some cases, like what they were able to set up in the demo environment, might have been the result of 2 hours worth of prep time, where over the course of a 6-month project, you're going to be able to build more. It's just infeasible for them to like
So that,
build an entire working system for you in a sales demo. But going back to the comment, I want to touch on a little bit about like uh, the nightmarish aspect of these projects, and how you should avoid them at all costs and hope that you retire before the project starts and pass them on to the next your predecessor.
Busted.
Um, I mean, I want to acknowledge that I think that can be a very real outcome or real perspective on these projects. And I have been a part of numerous projects where it seems like you could have been telling the same story of the one that I was at, where the system doesn't work, the users feel like they were duped. The consultants change their stories every time you talk to them, and in the end, you are left with shouldering the burden of making something work, in a way that, in a lot of cases, like takes you steps backwards away from the stable system that you were on. There's also no question that for all of you that like don't sit around all day trying to think of things to do, like this project is going to add an additional burden that you probably don't have time in your day without juggling things around or moving priorities or finding additional staff to kind of take your day-to-day responsibility. So I get that these projects are hard, and I get that they don't have the best reputation. I think that a lot of times what leads to that point of like complete frustration and nightmarish aspect is that a lot of times these vendors will answer questions in the sales cycle or before they get into the project, and tell you what they think you want to hear without really understanding what your question is. So, it's kind of like whatever your question is, the answer is yes. And then I will kind of figure out a way to try to, explain that in a way that you move forward. And I think you have to be realistic about what the capabilities of the system are. I think you also have to be realistic about what it is you want accomplished by the system. And to me, like one source of aggravation is a government who's saying, I want things exactly the way that I do them now. And a vendor saying, that's not how we do them. This is the way that we do it going forward. And I think like what you have to realize, and I think, it's easy for me sitting on the outside looking at this, is that like neither answer is correct and neither answer is right, or neither answer is correct and neither answer is wrong at the same time. So yes, moving to a cloud version of the product, it may require that you adopt some bit of standardized functionality that you don't do now. And like moving to that change might be uncomfortable. But at the same time, I think the software vendor also has to understand that there are specific requirements and unique considerations that you may not have the ability to change, and that you need those incorporated into the project. And I think that's where really the functional requirements come into play, is that there are those specific statutory or business process restrictions or conditions that you can't change. You get a file from the county, you need to import that in, you need to work on that file, and then maybe adopt it later on as you're working on doing your billings. Like you can describe that process and those requirements of what that looks like ahead of time. You can also fill out and identify what the vendor is going to do to facilitate that process. And you can assign roles and responsibilities as part of a statement of work for facilitating that. And you can hold your vendor accountable for, achieving the results that they've agreed to. Assuming you've kind of identified that vision and assuming you've identified those outcomes or documented those outcomes. I think where the nightmare component comes in is when you start the project and you don't have that stuff done. Then what happens is you move forward with one assumption of what the future is going to look like.
Yeah.
The vendor moves forward with an assumption that you're going to follow what they want you to do. And there's a clash in between. And usually you end up bearing the brunt of that clash because the vendor basically isn't responsible for day-to-day activities. Like they're able to basically wait you out. And at the same time, anytime you ask them for help on a time and materials contract, they're just billing you and you are paying for basically for the project to kind of spin its wheels, so to speak. So I think that the way that you head a lot of that stuff off is that you go through this readiness cycle or this readiness phase that allows you to clearly define what those requirements are, to clearly define those expectations. And then at that point, you're finding a vendor that is able to effectively take on that accountability. Now, the other thing that I would recommend, and I don't know if this is an option for you guys and where you are with your relationship with BS&A, but this I would assume is kind of being treated somewhat as an upgrade project, or at least you're staying within the BS&A family, so to speak. I think if this is all that you've looked at, then perhaps this could also be an opportunity where if you look at BS&A, you may also look at a competitor to of BS&A and see how they offer or what the solution they have to that same functionality. It doesn't mean that you have to um, commit to going with another provider, but I think it will help you bring in other ideas into this process that ultimately may allow you from a change management perspective to open up a little bit and accept a different process or a different way of getting to that end result. When we develop requirements, um, the way that we categorize the requirements, and it's a bit simplistic, but I think it really works, is we ask, does this describe what we need done or how we need it done? And I think if you're describing what you need done, then it's an acceptable requirement. But you have to some extent, leave yourself open for the vendor potentially doing it in a different way. And when you see the vendor demos, and if you're comparing, 3 or 4 different products, or even just 2 different products, my guess is what potentially you'd see is that the vendors are achieving the same outcome, or they're achieving or driving at the same what, but they may be doing it in different ways. And if you're looking at ultimately selecting the product that best fits your needs, you're kind of selecting from those that all achieve your what, but then do it in the best way possible or have the best how. And I think that some of that nightmarish aspect of the projects that you describe is where, even in cases where you're moving towards the same what, if you're going about doing it with a different process or a different how, then that change might be uneasy and you push back. Or if the vendor completely doesn't understand what you're looking for and they screw up both the what and the how, then you have a much bigger problem. But I think those what statements can really be objective functional requirements that you can work to kind of set clear expectations for your project.
Kathleen, you had a comment?
Yeah, Mike, I like a lot of what you're saying. I have background in this realm of ERP, so I would echo what you're saying, and successful projects involve customer engagement. And that's where I've seen sometimes they fall down because people are used to doing it a certain way, but the entity has decided we're gonna do process improvements. And you don't get that day-to-day feedback of, wait a minute, I don't click here, I click there, and this is the path I get to. So I think the good thing about this team is we have that awareness and we want to evaluate systems fairly and make sure that we actually engage our users for input. And that's on us to make sure that that happens. So one of the questions I asked BS&A is, what is Scio Township's role in the implementation? And they didn't answer that. And that's the kind of stuff that makes it successful. What are you expecting us to do?
Yeah.
I'd like to validate my data. I would like to see a demo. I would like to test my own scenarios, whether that's in a sandbox or whatever. So I think you're giving us a lot of good feedback and I appreciate it.
Yeah. If I could add one thing to this, because I think the way that you guys have described the services that BS&A are providing is training services,
Right.
which I don't think is inaccurate, but I do think that it's important to keep in mind kind of the limitations of what they would be providing if they are providing training. So, I can provide training to you guys around, best practices in ERP implementations without knowing a thing about you. And I think to some extent, you want to be careful that BS&A is not providing you training around hypothetical functionality within BS&A or what a generic, typical client would be providing or would be taking advantage of within BS&A. We try to make the distinction, and granted these are not the best terms, but training is different than consulting. And
Right.
in an environment where someone is providing you training, they're largely reading off of a script or providing generic training or information that would be applicable in a variety of different situations. And then you, as the client, are left to take that knowledge and then apply it to your township scenario, make decisions about how the product needs to function, potentially look at its applicability to different business processes. There are hundreds of configuration decisions that you'd be making if this was a new implementation. And I think part of the danger of an upgrade is that you take things for granted that you decided 15 years ago and you don't challenge those status quos. So one thing with all of our projects is we just assume you're changing your chart of accounts. Most upgrade projects treat the chart of accounts from the previous project as your chart of accounts going forward. And I think you lose some opportunities to take advantage of some of that new functionality. So kind of going back to the training versus implementation, or training versus kind of consulting comparison. If the vendor's role is to come in and provide you training, and then your role, speaking to your point of what does BS&A want you to do? If BS&A wants you to then do the rest of the project based on that training, then potentially that leaves you in a position where you still don't know what other organizations have configured, how other organizations have applied this technology, how to use it most effectively. But yes, you're effectively more knowledgeable on the new product and then can go ahead and make your decisions. If you compare that to kind of a consulting role, before that consultant is coming in and giving you training, they would spend time with you first to understand what your problems are. They would also take time to provide recommendations on how their solution can better meet your problems. They are then able to deliver kind of those recommendations in the form of training, and I think make that training much more specific and applicable to your organization. So, I would question, or I would work to ensure that in addition to identifying roles and responsibilities for the township when you're going through the project, is also making sure there's clear roles and responsibilities for the BS&A consultants. And part of that is not just giving you information, but part of it is receiving information from you, kind of manipulating it or analyzing it, understanding it, and then using that to modify their recommendations back to you. So you basically task them with problem solving, and you don't take on that problem solving role alone.
It's good advice, and I do think this BS&A upgrade is really a whole new system. I mean, and I appreciate what you said about a lot of jurisdictions making assumptions, not revisiting. There are a lot of capabilities of BS&A that we don't use, a lot of probably new things we should revisit. So I would really appreciate it, Mike, if you are able to share that kind of generic inventory of processes. And then I've noted within each, we would need to kind of come up with our functional requirements. And I do think it would include all of finance and HR. We've budgeted for some online HR capability, assessing, treasury. I would be curious from assessing and treasury, what requirements specifically because the financial management is kind of Scio stuff, right? But treasury and assessing, I know there's sharing parcel information, and what kind of integration do we need? Ryan, you mentioned that you actually send the BS&A file to the county,
I
correct?
don't know if that's probably something you
Andrew?
guys, Andrew might know, but I bet it probably goes to equalization.
Yes,
We end up having to settle with the county for everything we collected. So we have to send them a backup of our database each year in March, and they look at what we collected versus what we should have collected, and then if we either under collected, over collected, or collected the right amount, we move money around between the parties depending on what the report in the database shows. So it's another aspect of this that makes it a little bit more complicated. But it's probably a key requirement because the county doesn't seem open to using anything but BS&A for that record. But to your point, it doesn't necessarily mean that looking at other things is bad, it just might give us a better idea of how to use what we already have in a more efficient way. Oh,
I'd be curious about what they do with that file, right?
yeah.
I mean-
I'll try and get Deep D to give me an answer, but
They literally pull it up in BS&A
and
and,
then they run the reports to audit, so that way the
Yeah.
reports we print out and physically hand to them have to match the database.
Yeah.
I have another question for Mike. Mike, one of the things we asked for was a project plan. It doesn't have to be customer specific. Show me a project plan, and they will not show us a project plan until we sign an agreement. And I wanted to look at the project plan, which tells you who does what, when they do it, what are the dependencies. So what's your thoughts about them not providing a project plan in advance?
I think to me the term project plan is a loaded term. I would say that the norm in this space is for firms not to provide a full project plan before you start the project, because in order to develop an effective project plan, that requires communications back with you. It assumes the scope is fixed. And I think a key component of a project plan is really like assigning dates and a timeline to all of those tasks. So I think that it's probably not unusual for them to push back on not providing a full project plan. I think that some of the things that you're looking for, they definitely should be providing, things like, their approach to implementing your system, things like, roles and responsibilities for implementation, things
Right.
like what are their milestones, their deliverables along
Right.
to get you there. I wouldn't necessarily call those things a project plan. So, perhaps like somehow it got lost, your request and what you were really looking for kind of got disguised in calling it a project plan, and that's what they took objection to. But I would say that any firm that's putting together a proposal in response to a project is going to be able to provide that project approach and milestone and deliverable information. That forms the guts of a project plan, but I think there's more to development of a project plan, and I guess to some extent I could see their point on why they would hesitate to ship you a templated project plan in the event that it gets taken out of context.
So the other question I ask, because this is in my wheelhouse, is what's your implementation methodology? And they were a little dodgy on that and saying this is an upgrade. We don't have a methodology. And it's like, but you'll always have a methodology.
Yeah.
When what happens? Is it phase-based? Is it, as you said, deliverable-based? But there needs to be a methodology that says, where do you start? What's the middle? What's the end? What happens after go live? So they were a little dodgy on that.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think if what they said was we don't have a methodology because this is an upgrade, then like every bell and alarm and siren that
Yeah.
your head should
So-
be going off, because I think to me, like, yes, this is an upgrade, but what an upgrade assumes, like, to me, the definition of an upgrade is like when your smartphone upgrades in the middle of the night and says, you need to upgrade this in the next 3 days, and you click yes, and it turns off and it turns back on, and like you hope nothing is different when you turn it back on, and you hope it works. To me, that's what an upgrade is that you're doing this project with as minimal amount of effort, and you're hoping that your general user population like doesn't notice that things are different on the back end. I don't think an organization that's going through this project for the first time since 2008 should be doing an upgrade thinking this simple upgrade that no one is going to notice, or we hope no one is going to notice, is going to get us through the next 15 years. I think that you're going through this project with the idea of becoming more efficient, producing better outcomes, taking advantage of new functionality. And in that case, like, I don't think it's a simple upgrade project. I think it's an implementation effort where even if they handle the cutover on the technical side of the system without anyone noticing, then there still should be some aspect of, if you use the phone as an analogy, someone going through each app on that phone saying, this is what the functionality is. How do you plan on using things in in your day-to-day life. Here's an app for you, or here's how we're going to configure email or Google Maps or the camera function, or whatever else is hidden in your phone so that you take advantage of it. I mean, I think with my Android phone here that's here, I probably use less than 2% of the apps that are on that thing. I don't think you want that to be the case with your ERP system. You don't want to use 2% of the functionality. You want to deploy and get training on and have someone kind of sit with you and work to optimize, the vast majority of those functions that are coming along with that upgrade. And I think, to me, that's the difference, is that, like, as an organization, you don't have time to like play around with this and see what you like over the next 6 months. Like, there is a focused project, and I think to your point of, like, if they're treating this as an upgrade, then yeah, they maybe don't have a methodology. It's like, send it to you and say good luck. But I don't think that's what you want to be signing up for.
And Mike, I laughed when you said every alarm bell, because that is what happened for us. I mean, certainly Becky's stories, I've heard those stories. I've been concerned about going online when they said they didn't have an implementation plan, and because it's not an upgrade, it's a totally new system.
My understanding is we have to, don't we? I mean,
Eventually.
eventually, there won't be any more support for the one that we're on.
Correct.
So
We
they're
need to do
pushing
something.
us. They're
We need to
pushing
do
us.
something. And I guess the way that my thinking has evolved, I don't know if it's correct, but is that this is not an upgrade, this is an implementation effort. I think both you and Kathleen have given us the very good advice to create a scope, kind of the processes, the requirements. And even if we do, team, like, decide to stick with BS&A, I think maybe it would be worth the time and effort to develop our scope and develop our processes and requirements for ourselves first. And then kind of re-engage with BS&A or get a demo from Tyler or from whomever else. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the first, like, you can't, I try to create kind of an analogy of equating ERP system to other things. But I mean, I think if you view this in the context of, like, purchasing a car, you can't go and start test driving cars until you really find out and understand what you want in that car. Are you looking to drive by yourself, or are you hauling around a family of 5 or 6? Because that's going to make a huge difference on, what it is you need and what you want to contract for. I think just in coming back to kind of the ERP space, like, if you don't know what you want, then it's going to be impossible for you. And I'm not saying you don't know what you want, but if you don't have kind of that alignment and kind of joint understanding across the organization of really what you're looking for in this product, it's going to be impossible to communicate that to BS&A. And I think you're running the risk of them coming into this project with a different set of assumptions than what you are. And I think you made the point about they're forcing us to upgrade. If I go back to my cell phone analogy of, like, you're still using the flip phone from 20 years ago, like, at some point they're saying, yes, we're not going to support that technology anymore. Here is the most basic smartphone. Like, it will make calls and send text messages. Good luck. But, like, I don't think that's what you want. I think, you want something that's going to be able to fully use that new functionality. And, that is not like taking this new modern system and having it perform as though it's the system that you implemented in 2008. And I think to do that, it takes, looking at your business needs, comparing it to what's out there in the market, and then doing an analysis to figure out, is this the right product for us? And if so, how do we then structure that implementation to the point of, like, what's your implementation approach to get that functionality kind of installed and delivered for us?
And Mike, we just, BS&A has been what we've always used, what most community, I think all communities in Washington County use, many in Michigan.
I came in 1995, and we were on the DOS system.
Yeah.
That is when we were converting. The year I came in,
DOS was an operating system.
1996, we went to BS&A.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was the DOS system kind of homegrown here in the county?
Yes, it was,
Yeah.
everybody was on like the DOS. I don't even know what it was. It was
Yeah.
weird. They didn't even train me on it. I went straight to BS&A. So
Yeah.
that was in 1996.
So I think, Mike, also a lot of us have been, you know, kind of conditioned to feel like BS&A is the only game in town. And I know that's not true. What are some of the kind of major, I know I've heard about Tyler, I know there's a lot of others, but in terms of one ERP that readily handles assessing, tax, and financial management all in one, what are some of the common ones?
So let me say real quick first is that, you know, in saying that you could look at options or saying that there's a market out there, I'm not saying that you should leave BS&A because I think
Right,
there
I know.
potentially is a danger of looking at this and going, the grass is greener on the other side. And then, you know, when you realize that you've abandoned your relationship with BS&A, you have something now that you know, maybe isn't as stable or isn't as you know, co-beneficial that is, you know, than what you've experienced over the last 30 something years with BS&A. That being said, you know, I think that this is a major milestone in your relationship with BS&A, and I think it gives you an opportunity to kind of like reset, talk about those expectations, and figure out like what we need going forward to better serve this organization. You know, and I think there's nothing wrong with using this as an opportunity to kind of reset that relationship with BS&A. I think, you know, being in Michigan, with them being in Michigan, you know, they provide, you know, potentially some opportunities that make them a little bit more unique than other providers that are out in this space. And I don't want you to like, you know, like I said, run from those to the new shiny object that, you know, may have a better platform or a new, you know, it's some specific piece of functionality, because I think the whole thing has to be considered in terms of their ability to like serve you as a partner. Nothing, I think as you move towards the cloud-based environment here, you become more dependent on your vendors, not less dependent on your vendors. So that relationship component is important. In terms of the mix of vendors that could help you in the future, I guess this is where it depends specifically on what you're trying to accomplish. So if you are looking for one vendor to provide that, you know, ERP, payroll, tax, assessing kind of complete package, I would say that, you know, I could give you a couple names of vendors that we typically see in kind of the smaller government space. I don't know if all of them have solutions that would meet your needs from kind of the entirety of that suite. I think even applications that offer, you know, assessing solutions or, you know, tax solutions may not offer solutions that are specific to meet your requirements in Michigan or, you know, so I think there is a part of this where you have to kind of look at it and see, you know, is this viable? I know Tyler offers options. You know, BS&A would be the second one I would think of. There's a firm called Springbrook that offers options.
That would cause a problem, I think.
There's a firm called OpenGov that offers options. Again, I don't know if they offer options across the spectrum of everything that you're looking for. I can also provide a list. We have a kind of a regular list of ERP vendor names that interact with you know, with our organization and you know, come to our conference and things like that. So I can share that list. There's probably 24 software names on that list. You know, some of them may be more limited than the suite of products that you're looking to provide. Some of them may be more focused on larger governments. You know, but I think you could probably pretty easily narrow it down and get to a couple that you know, you think would be viable candidates.
I'm pretty sure in Michigan that they all use BS&A. I want to say that and that I think would cause a very big problem with, I know, us in assessing and you and Treasury if we left BS&A, because we go back and forth with our townships that are, and everybody's on BS&A.
And it looks
There's
like-
nobody off BS&A.
At least in the city of Ann Arbor as an example, so they use Tyler Munis for their finance.
Oh, but not for assessment.
but it appears that they still use,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
for their assessing BS&A.
Yes, and all of our reports go through BS&A to the county, everything. If they're on BS&A, we're on BS&A.
Yeah.
All of our stuff back and forth to the county is all BS&A. When we close out our reports, we have to say save to our 4017, which goes to the county.
Also be good for us to understand what the county's position is, timeline on moving to the cloud.
Yes. I think they're stalling.
Yeah, yeah.
In
So
larger organizations, the software ends up being a little bit more specialized. So, you know, in most larger counties, I would assume, or cities like Ann Arbor, that the financial and HR payroll package that they have is not the same system that runs the assessing functions. And then you're able to, you know, and this goes back to functional requirements and defining process flows, is you're able to then, you know, define integration needs that then are supported through the product, where you're getting information from one system and transferring it to another. In the ERP projects that we've worked with, where you're dealing with larger organizations, the functionality in finance, procurement, project accounting, HR, payroll, there is a market and suite of products that has developed